This is on.
Yes, that's 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Until Molly gets back. Oh yeah, I got a call from Dave too. If I can have your attention, we'll call the June City of Rolla Planning Zoning meeting to order. TV, I think, is give us the okay, and they're on. So, welcome. There seems to be some confusion about what it is, what we do, and who we are. What in education we call the teachable moment. So I'll give you a quick overview, since most of you I have not seen here before, and I've been here 20 years, more or less. Rolla Planning and Zoning is a 9-person board appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. It is required by statute, state statutes revised, Chapter 89, and also regulated by the sections and resolutions of the City of Rolla, Section 42. We are all residents and citizens of Rolla who volunteer our time and talents to help Rolla be a better place to live. We currently only have 8 members, and we need a quorum to 5 to hold a meeting, so tonight we're lucky. We have a good attendance. The City Council and the Board of Adjustment also come under these same state statutes. The chair does not vote unless there's a tie. Contrary to some beliefs, we do not make final decision on issues, as we only make recommendations to the City and Council. We basically have 4 options to us. 1 is send to the City Council our recommendation for passage of the issue. 2, send recommendations for passage with changes that are voted on and approved by the Commission. 3, we can send our recommendation for non-approval, but then we're asked to give reasons why we made that decision. And 4, we can table and set aside or postpone the issue. As our meetings are to conduct city business, we try to run our meetings business-like, and we're not a sporting event, classical performance, or a rally. We do not slap, clap, applause, shout, or any of the other similar behavior. To speak, you need to be recognized by the chair at the appropriate times for citizen comments. We follow Robert's Rules of Order for our meetings, and we would like to get your cooperation to achieve an orderly and efficient meeting. We have 4 public hearings scheduled tonight, and also a segment of at the close of the meeting for citizens' comments. The commissioners are aware of the strong views on item 4, text 01, homeless shelters and related issues. At the public hearing, we are seeking new information and do not need 8 to 10 people basically saying the same thing. Please limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes, and also please try to make it new information. With that, we'll move to our agenda. We have a posted agenda. Any proposed changes by the commissioners? Hearing none, we'll move forward with what was posted, printed, and distributed. First item of business is to approve the minutes. You should have all received a copy of the minutes. Any suggestions for corrections or changes? If not, I'll approve those as printed and distributed. The next section is report on City Council, recent City Council actions. We evidently have none this month. Next section is old business. We have none of that this month. Next item is new business. We have 2 items there. The first one is Sub 22-05, Wolf's Corner. Tom?
Right. As you said, this is Wolf's Corner, minor subdivision, which is the final plat. Property is located on Stratford Lane and Devonshire Lane, kind of curves around there. The applicant owns basically 2 platted lots on there, and the house is on 1 lot. The applicant is seeking to be able to build a pool, but they want to build the pool on that other lot. The zoning code doesn't allow for you to have an accessory structure on a separate lot. It's got to be on the same lot as your house, or you can cross the lot line by, like I say, if you build a house across the lot line, we consider that to be, even though it's 2 lots, consider that to be 1 lot. But in this case, they needed to combine the property together for this. Property is zoned R1, which is the single-family residential zoning district. Here's a picture of the plat. It's, as I said, it's basically just combining both the lots together into 1 big lot. So just to summarize, it combines 2 residential lots into 1, and it appears to be in compliance with all subdivision requirements. You have some alternatives. You can find that it meets requirements for approval and recommend approval. You can find that it could meet it with conditions, recommend it with conditions, or find that it does not meet the code requirements, state those reasons, and recommend the City Council deny the plat, or if you need more time, table to a certain date. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Tom? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that the request meets all applicable requirements and recommend the City Council approve the request.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Sarah can make a choice of these 2. I think they both said something. So, any final discussion or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Ryder,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item of business is sub 22-06, University Fraternity Subdivision number 3. Tom?
This is another minor subdivision. This property is located on Fraternity Circle. It's kind of north of I-44. This is a property that the University of Missouri, UMR Rolla, owns. It's a little unusual. Usually the university doesn't come to the city for plats and things. They buy property and they just kind of go and build. But in this case, there are some easements that are currently in these platted lots, and they need to have those easements vacated in order to get the property unencumbered. The university is exempt from a lot of things, but they are still they still do have to adhere to easements and road rights of way and things like that. They chose to do this as a subdivision plat, minor subdivision, to combine the lots together and get rid of the easements all in one. The property is zone GI, which is government and institutional. That's the zoning district. It's used for government-owned property, such as property that's owned by the university. This is a picture of the plat. As I said, it basically combines all those properties together into one. This is to allow for their general services building. They're relocating that to this property. They're planning to begin construction fairly soon. This shows the easements that are proposed to be vacated. Basically, there is an easement along the property lines for each of the lots. This combines 6 lots into 1 big lot. These easements that are to be vacated are not needed. There are no utilities located in these easements. There are a few things that they'll need to grant some easements for, but that hasn't been quite figured out yet where exactly those need to be granted, so that'll happen at a different time. But these easements in particular are not needed, and it appears to be in compliance with all zoning and subdivision requirements. Of course, you have the same alternatives as last time. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions from commissioners? Here again, I'd entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we send this to the city council with our approval.
Second. A motion and second. Any further discussion or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Ryder,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to section 5 is public hearings. First item is zoning 22-02, Car Mart. Tom?
Yes, this is 1306 Highway 72 East. This is the property. It's kind of next to the Car Mart property. The Car Mart's the applicant. The owner is the owner of Los Arcos, owns that property. So Car Mart's actually seeking to lease this property. The property is currently zoned C1, which is neighborhood commercial. It is adjacent to the Carmart property, which is C2, general retail. The Carmart is wanting to build a paved area for display of their more cars that are for sale. The problem is the C1 district doesn't allow for a car dealership, and the car dealership is currently located in C2, so they needed to rezone the property for this expansion of the car dealership. You notice in the area the surrounding properties. There's some properties that are zoned C2, or some that are zoned C1. There's some across the street that's zoned C3, which is the highway commercial. So that this particular area has got kind of a mixture of zoning. This is a street view. You can see the Carmart, and basically to the right, the grassy field areas is where they're talking closer to the Highway 72. So they're talking about building this paved area for car display. So just to summarize, the comprehensive plan does designate the area as appropriate for neighborhood and community commercial uses. Neighborhood would be more of like the C1, but the community commercial is more of like the C2 that's being asked for. So it's kind of an area in transition even on the comprehensive plan, I would say. It is adjacent to properties that is zoned C2. It is there's also just a mixture of commercial uses and zones in that area. The rezoning would allow for the proposed car sales display. You have some alternatives. You can find that the request meets the criteria for approval and recommend the City Council approve the request. You can find that it's not appropriate and recommend that the City Council deny the request. Or you can, if you need more time, you can table to the next meeting. Do you have any questions for me before you move to the public hearing?
Tom, on the, where it butts up against R1 and R3, there's a buffer there of timber. And is there a way we can specify he has to leave that as a buffer?
Well, you could, but I have actually already been talking to them about their design for their parking lot, and that was actually what I suggested to them is if they leave that there and maybe plant a few more evergreen trees, because there's some gaps, then that would suffice for the buffer instead of having to build a fence and plant trees and this and that. And so they're more than willing to do that.
So we just take them at the word that they'll leave that and do that?
Well, if they don't, they've got to spend a bunch more money.
Okay.
They have to build a fence if they don't provide the buffer.
You don't have to build a
Maybe.
fence. You can have a larger area, which they've got plenty of area,
Yeah.
and plant the trees and shrubs and all that.
Okay. Any other questions for Tom? Hearing none, I'll officially open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward, state your name and address at the podium for the record. Please try to limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Please try not to repeat whatever everyone else has said, if there is anybody. Anyone wishing to speak to this in favor, please come forward. We have a lovely post, so I can't see some of the room, so if we don't see you, please stand up and wave your hand or something. Anybody wishing to speak against this proposal, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll officially close the public hearing. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners for Tom? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we forward this to the city council with our recommendation for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions? Roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Yes?
Ryder,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Next item is vacation 22-01, curators of the University of Missouri. You've seen this before several times. It's really important that we get it right because it goes on the Mylar plat that I have to sign and send to the city, county government. So they keep tweaking and getting everything right. So
Well,
it's a
Yeah.
vacation remainder of Spring Street north of 13th Street, a portion of 13th Street between Spring Street and Bishop Avenue, and the remainder of the alley between Spring Street and Bishop Avenue and 13th Street and University Drive.
All right, this is actually a new request. You may recall we did a vacation in the area for some other streets. I'll kind of show you which ones those were. There was this over here, this triangle over here, this triangle over here, an alley through here, and an area over here, and some other things. But this area was left alone before the reason because this property, the 708 13th Street, was owned by someone else, not by the city and not by the university. The university has since purchased that property, and since there is no other property owners in that area, they're requesting to vacate the rest of 13th Street, the rest of Spring Street in that area, and that alley along the north, so it'll be the rest of that alley. And thus, there won't be any streets in that area. They are leaving 13th Street adjacent to the Dairy Queen property, between Dairy Queen and Highway 63, leaving that in place because the Dairy Queen is still not owned by the city or the university. So that's what this is all about. The university is planning to construct more parking lot in the area, at least temporarily. Their long-term plans call for buildings and whatnot, but at least temporarily some parking lots in the area, and so this will get the streets out of the way to allow for the parking lot. So just to summarize, there are some utilities in the streets in the alley. Those are going to remain for now as they're needed and abandoned if they need to be abandoned. And so because of that, an easement will be retained with this vacation. There are no objections from the utility providers because everything's going to remain in place at least for now. Those streets are no longer needed for access or circulation, and then, as I said, after the parking lot gets built, it'll provide whatever access and circulation is needed, but the streets aren't needed. Do you have any questions for me before you move to the public hearing?
I have one. Those people that have the apartments at 708, how are they going to have access?
So the university just recently purchased that property.
Oh, okay.
They do intend to keep the building at least for now, and I said they'll be serviced from the parking lot. This will be kind of surrounded by parking, but the university has purchased that.
Thank you.
Will these additional changes require us to change the major thoroughfare plan that we adopted or approved?
No, since these streets are going away, and as I said, they're not needed, so no. And they also won't require us to change that plat. It'd be nice maybe to make sure the plat is correct, but the university isn't required to go and replat things with the city.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll officially open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this vacation, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Please try to limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Please try not to repeat what's been stated before. Anybody in favor of this proposal, please come forward. Anybody opposed, please come forward. Many nights we don't get a lot of business at the public hearing, so. Hearing none, I'll officially close the public hearing. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners for Tom or me? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to recommend the city council approve the request to vacate the streets and alleyways and retain the area as utilities.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Yes?
Kreider,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Next public hearing is text 22-01, homeless shelters and related uses.
Skip one. Chip 2.
Oh, we gotta do State Street.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Next one is vacation 22-02, curators of University of Missouri, vacation to State Street, north of 11th Street. Tom?
All right, so this is another vacation of the streets. I said this is State Street, north of 11th. Again, this is from the university asking for this. State Street currently, the rest of the right-of-way north of this area that's to be requesting to be vacated was vacated previously. So this area here is what's left, basically, of State Street. Has a little bit of history behind it. They tried to vacate it once, and that was not approved by City Council. But now it's a different time, and it's a part of their. They're beginning to work on project for that entryway into the university, and so part of this right-of-way is kind of in the way for that, and they'll need to put fill on it, and the part of I believe there's a parking garage in the area and whatnot. So this shows from their campus master plan, just to give you an idea of, I put on there what the area to propose to be vacated, how it kind of fits with their campus master plan anyway. They are proposing that this, where the street was, it'd be retained as kind of an access way or a big sidewalk that the fire department could use for fire access and emergency access and whatnot, but it'd be a sidewalk for most of the time. So just to summarize, there are utilities in this area. The university is actively working to relocate some of the utilities and take over some utilities and get them out of the way, because they need this for the project they're working on. And working with the utility companies, there isn't a need for an easement this time, because they're actively looking to get these utilities out of the street. So an easement would not be retained on this one. There's no objection from the utility providers, and the street is no longer necessary for circulation, especially once they get done with their entryway project. However, it will be retained as or used for emergency access, because it provides the closest access to some buildings in their final design. They'll be working with the fire department on that. Do you have any questions for me before you move to the public hearing?
Tom, did you say the fire department is okay with this, and will the street or sidewalk be strong enough to hold a fire truck?
Yes, it'd be constructing a sidewalk that's strong enough for a fire truck, and then they'd have the bollards or whatnot. But they've done it on the next street over. It's be the same type of thing.
If a fire engine can go down it, how do you keep general public from driving down it?
So I think I haven't seen the plans, but I think the general idea is you'd have some bollards, and then they're locking. If the fire department you have to unlock it and get in there. The last meeting they were talking about agreeing on a particular type of bollard that's faster for everybody to get access to. But we're working with each other.
And the fire department's okay with backing out of there in case they have to leave for another call? That's the only way in?
They can go up to 150 feet. Now, I don't know, just by code, and I don't know how long this thing is, or how long in the final plans, how long they need to be able to go, because once that entryway is in, there will also be that side too. So really, they don't need to go very far for fire access.
Will it be possible to access going north out of there along the sidewalks and stuff they have already there? They have a hard surface.
On that campus plan, that's sort of what it looks like, but once again, they're sort of finalizing the final plans for that area, so I'd have trouble. I haven't seen it, so I'd have trouble saying that's how it will be.
But once we vacate it, it becomes their responsibility, not the city's. Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll officially open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this, please come forward. State your name and address for the record. Please try to limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Please try not to repeat what's already been said. Anybody in favor of this vacation of the street, please come forward. Got a lot of patience, but I don't think I see anybody moving, so. Anybody opposed to this, please come forward. Hearing none, I'll officially close this public hearing. Here again, I'd entertain a motion. Unless there's further questions.
Make a motion, we send this to the city council with our approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any final questions or discussion? Roll call vote, please, Sarah.
Anderson,
Yes?
Ryder,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously, thank you. Now we get to text 22-01, homeless shelters and related uses. Tom?
Okay. Yes, so this is a text amendment. A text amendment is basically a change to our zoning code. So our zoning code is it's a big, thick book, or it's online. It goes through all of what districts, what you can do in this district, what you can do in that district, and all kinds of land use type regulations. So a text amendment is basically a proposal to change what is written in those rules. This particular text amendment is about homeless shelters and related type uses. So currently the zoning code doesn't actually talk about homeless shelters or regulate them in any way, so it doesn't mention it whatsoever. So that's caused some problems with how staff interpreted that was that if it's not allowed, then if it's not stated in the code, then perhaps it's not allowed. There is some ways for somebody who's wanting to do that type of thing to get it approved, but just not by right in any location. So this proposed amendment would allow it in some districts. It would allow it as just by right in some districts. It would allow it with a conditional use permit in some other districts. It would prohibit in some other zoning districts, depending on what we're talking about. It also adds some requirements for any such operation, whereas right now, like I said, if there's nothing in the code that limits or talks about how you operate that type of operation. There are currently some assistance organizations in Rolla. The most visible is the Rolla Mission. It's one that most people talk about. There are churches that sometimes provide food for people. There are other places that provide other types of assistance for people who are homeless and whatnot. But the Rolla Mission is the main one. We can't really talk about this text amendment without talking about the Rolla Mission, but it should point out that it's not just about the Rolla Mission. It encompasses some other types of uses that would also kind of fall in this area, like, for example, the Russell House. It's a domestic violence shelter. Somebody is suffering domestic violence, they need to leave their house, they can go there and stay there, and that kind of is a shelter, because this person who goes there doesn't have a home, therefore it's kind of a shelter. It's in the same kind of vein, and also had to remember that the Rolla Mission, some other group could come to Rolla and want to try to do the same type of services and whatnot, so it's not just about the Rolla Mission. They do, however, intend to relocate or expand where they're at, and so having some requirements would allow to provide some answers on where they can go and how they could operate. And as I said, there could come a time when some other organizations could come to town and seek to provide these types of services, so it would be good to have something to be able to tell them as well. Should say that although here in Rolla, it's people are noticing homelessness, but it is an issue that's in every single city in the country. It's not just a Rolla thing. Larger cities tend to attract more homeless types of people. That's because of access to jobs and services. Larger cities attract more of every type of person, and it's going to seek a better life and access to jobs and services and whatnot. Rolla is a regional hub for the area. There's a lot of smaller towns in the area. Rolla is just the biggest place in this region, so it's going to attract people for jobs and services, and that's a good thing. We benefit from being a regional hub, and that's additional business that comes to town and growth. But on the negative side, it does attract people who are needing access to jobs and services, but also don't have a home when they move here. A state agency contracts with a group to do a point-in-time count all across the state, and basically what that is, on a particular day in January, it's like a census to try to count the homeless people. They count 44 people in Phelps County. I should point out that their definition of homeless is basically people who are living outside or living in a shelter, that type of thing. So it would not include people who are like temporarily homeless, maybe crashing on a couch, that sort of thing. So that's why that number is a little lower than might have expected. There is a number of people who are just sort of temporarily homeless, just very shortly, but that's what they came up with January 2021, and that's the last one that's available. This is a map of Missouri. These red dots are what I could find for homeless shelters located throughout the state. Oddly enough, some of them I had to search for specifically because I thought I'd heard that there was one there and whatnot, so this may not be quite all of them, but it's not terribly easy to actually try to locate where all the homeless shelters are, even though there are a few websites that try to tell you. They admit they don't get them all. And then none of those types of websites actually include the Rolla location, which was something that was a little interesting. But the Rolla location currently doesn't provide year-round or bed-type services. They just have, as we'll talk about, the Rolla mission just has recliners. But so that may be why they don't consider it a full-service homeless shelter if you're looking for a shelter. But on those websites that try to direct people where to go, it doesn't actually list the Rolla location. There are some locations, however, and you notice in the big cities, but there are locations in smaller towns, some places that are smaller than Rolla. When we talk about homelessness, there are a couple different types of homeless type people. There's one of them is sheltered versus unsheltered. So sheltered are people who actually are in a shelter. They have it's a emergency shelter that's placed them in some sort of building to stay. And then unsheltered is somebody who's homeless but is basically living outside or living in their car or something like that. And there's chronic versus temporary. There are some people who are in and out of homelessness for years and years, or just have always been homeless for several years. And then there are situations where somebody is homeless, for as short as one night, if they can get a housing situation figured out in just one night, or just a short period of time. I'd say there's also voluntary versus involuntary. There are some homeless people who choose that lifestyle and don't want to stop doing that lifestyle, but then there are others who would prefer not to, be involved with that. When you talk about homeless people, it includes men. It also, stereotypically, it would be kind of an older man is what you think of when you think of just homeless people. But it also includes women. It also includes couples who are, operating together. It also includes entire families who may be living in a car. And also, I put children, but probably not a whole lot of children, but people who are under 18, for example, people who may have run away from home, they may be homeless for a little while. So it includes young people also. It's just a wide variety of different types of people. And then there are other situations that aren't quite homelessness, especially as the way they define it, but say somebody who is kicked out of their parents' house and they go to crash on their friend's sofa for a couple months. It's not their house. They could be kicked out at any moment, so they're almost homeless. But it's couch surfing is almost there. There's some people who don't consider themselves to be homeless. They may have a car or something. They have a place to go, or they may have a tent in a location, something like that. There's situations that aren't quite homeless, but they're very close. And also, homelessness can happen for many different reasons. Some people may think that it's their own fault or something like that, and they just. But many people are closer to homelessness than they may want to realize. But a loss of a job and/or being evicted from a place that you're renting can start the process of becoming homeless. Some sort of unexpected event, such as a natural disaster, your house burns down, you get maybe a divorce, something you weren't expecting that affects your living situation. Also, For example, you get, say if you're kicked out of your house unexpectedly, like you see that with children when they turn 18. Some parents, kick them out and they don't have a place to go. They become homeless for a short period, hopefully. Mental illness. Some people, if they get a mental illness, they start to decline. That may cause them to lose their job. That may cause them to eventually lose their house, and that starts them on the path to becoming homeless. There's also substance abuse and alcohol abuse. Once again, you start on that path, then you may lose your job and eventually lose your house. Kind of related to that, I had a former girlfriend. She was in college when I knew her. She had a supportive family, just not a bad home life or anything like that. But she actually ended up addicted to heroin and meth, and ended up becoming homeless, and ended up committing various crimes as a way to support that lifestyle. Well, what started that cycle? As I said, it started from being in college and being on the right track. Well, what happened to her is she went to have her wisdom teeth pulled, and she was prescribed some pain medication, an opioid. And there are some people who are genetically predisposed to addiction, and just that one prescription led to that. Fortunately, I think she's gotten everything cleaned up and whatnot, but the point is that could literally happen to anyone. And substance abuse and mental illness and unexpected events can result in homelessness for just about anyone as well. Once you are homeless, it can be very difficult to recover. You may require some assistance in order to get back out. So when you're considering regulations, I think it's important that you consider the fact that these are regulations that are for organizations that are trying to help people who are in need of help. These are also not businesses that are doing it for a profit. They're working on donations and grants. These are not hotels and restaurants that make money, but these are shelters and soup kitchens that provide for basic human needs. I think it's important that you keep this in mind as we talk about all this. There are some limitations on what we can do. We cannot prohibit directly or indirectly any of these from operating everywhere within the city. So you can't just go and create an ordinance that says no homeless shelters within city limits of Rolla. You also cannot create an ordinance that says no homeless shelters within 9,000 feet of any building in Rolla, or something like that would, in effect, make it to where there is no place in Rolla to locate a homeless shelter. That's just not legal in having a zoning code. You can't just zone or prohibit unwanted uses. You also cannot prohibit churches from practicing their faith. That comes from a federal law called the RLUIPA, R-L-U-I-P-A. And basically that means, just like we can't tell a Catholic church they can't have a cross or something like that, something that's integral to their faith. Some churches provide services to the homeless as a part of their mission and a part of practicing their faith. So you can't really tell a church what to do. You can put some restrictions on how they do it, but you can't outright prohibit churches from practicing their faith. You can impose reasonable restrictions and conditions on this type of use and any type of use. And you can, within reason, restrict where these are located. So we've crafted the actual text amendment. I trust you've read through that, so I'll go through kind of the high points of that. These were put together with some assistance from the City Council and with research of how other places in Missouri did it. There's a wide variety of how other places did it, so these, if approved, would probably be the most comprehensive in Missouri, and covering bases on a lot of different subjects. Some cities are very lax on allowing on where these things go. Sometimes for a reason. They may have lost a court case and decided that it wasn't worth trying to regulate these types of things. But anyway, we looked at other locations in Missouri and try to base some of the stuff on what they were doing and add to it. A lot of it came from Springfield. So to start off, there are some definitions. I'm going to turn to there. There are some definitions. One of them is for an emergency shelter. So that would be something that's very temporary. Like say if there was a disaster, a tornado went through a part of Rolla, and Red Cross needed to set up a temporary shelter or something like that for people to be out temporarily. So those are pretty allowed in most places because that's, it's an emergency. We also put the domestic violence shelters in there. It's not a natural or a natural emergency or natural disaster or anything like that, but is an emergency for the people involved. They need a place to go very quickly, and so we put that in there. Then there's the overnight shelter, and that one is the one that probably will have the most concern. This would be a shelter that allows for people to stay there overnight, with beds, and for it's supposed to be fairly temporary, but but it could still be months if that's what somebody requires. It could still be months, and so then there's transitional housing. So that would be, I don't know if there's really an example of that here in Rolla, but there'd be something that's designed for people to go to after, say, an emergency shelter or an overnight shelter, to give them a little bit longer to get established. So like maybe 6 months to a year, that type of time frame, to get us to where they could get the job, get money saved up, and move out on their own. And then there's a soup kitchen, and that really is it's very similar to how the Rolla Mission actually operates. Operated before now. Right now they've sort of added a little bit more overnight than this definition would allow for. This would be for just so they provide food and services and whatnot by this definition, and also shelter for during times of bad weather. So like whether it's very, very cold or very hot or bad storms, that type of thing. So then with these 4 types of uses, they're proposed in different zoning districts. So either permitted by right, or as a conditional use permit, or just not allowed. So I've got a handy chart for just showing where it's proposed to be allowed or not allowed. So all these things are up for debate. Then the text proposes some requirements for these different uses, the main one being the overnight shelters. I think that's the one that people have the most concern about. So if there was an overnight shelter, this would be required for any of them, whether or not it had a conditional use permit. Some places is allowed by right. So these would be conditions that would be required no matter where they locate. So they would need to have an operations plan that would be reviewed by the police department. And turn there. And other city staff includes a variety of things. A log of the patrons, basically, so that we know who's coming and going, and making sure that people get identifications, so we know who's coming and going. Once again, require a background check on people before they stay the night for a period of time. Same thing, just to make sure we wouldn't. Yeah. There's also a distance requirement, so they must be a certain distance away from other shelters, 500 feet, no, 1,000 feet. That's basically to prevent from having a bunch, if there was to be more than one in town, prevent them from basically being all together and kind of want to spread them out just a little bit so that doesn't so much impact in just one area. Also a distance requirement from schools, playgrounds, and daycares. That's the distance, and the verbiage is lifted directly from the part of the state statutes that talks about where sex offenders can and can't live. And so this would basically just require that an overnight shelter always be that distance away from those types of uses. Then requires that the proprietor basically have a policy of no drugs or alcohol on premises. Require that there be security cameras so that if there was an issue on the property, then it would be easy to figure out what happened. It's not crystal clear on the parking, and the reason for that is, so basically it says you need to provide adequate parking. The reason for that is it's hard to know how much parking would be required for a homeless shelter. It kind of depends on how much staff is there, if any patrons have cars. Some of them do have cars, some of them might not have cars, and so there's really no way of knowing how much parking they would be required to have. So what it says is you need to provide adequate parking, work out agreements with other nearby properties if you need more parking, that sort of thing. And then that does require some for city staff to go and do inspections, and requires a fee to basically cover the cost of running those inspections to make sure that they're meeting all these conditions and any other conditions. Say if it's something that's approved with a conditional use permit, make sure it's meeting those conditions as well. And then there's some requirements for the soup kitchen type. So basically requires an operations plan also. It does require some screening for outdoor areas. Basically, you can't see that outdoor area. Same, also no drugs and alcohol type policy on campus. Also, same thing with security cameras, same thing with parking, and same thing with the inspections and the fee. There's a requirement for the transitional housing. Basically just says that it needs to be some distance away from any other facility that's on a different property at least. Once again, just you don't want to have it all concentrated in one area. So just to summarize, this text amendment is intended to regulate homeless shelters and those related uses. It provides for some restrictions and requirements which are intended to mitigate the impacts of those uses. Some homeless people in Rolla have caused issues. There's no debate about that. It's not always. Let's see here. Let me read it correctly. Okay. The homeless population has been demonstrated to have caused issues with property damage, arson, public disturbances, drug use, theft, and assaults. However, not all homeless people commit these acts, and not all are related to providers of assistance of homeless persons. You do have some alternatives as you go work your way through this. You can find that this text amendment is needed and recommend the City Council approve the text amendment as presented or with modifications that you come up with. You can find that it is not appropriate and so recommend the City Council not take action on this, or if you need more time you can table it to the next meeting. Do you have any questions for me before you move to the public hearing?
I have one. What'd you say the mission comes under on these?
Under the definition we have here right now, they would qualify as an overnight shelter.
Okay,
Based on how they're operating today.
thank you.
Tom,
Yeah.
has our city legal staff looked this over at all?
Yes, and so the legal staff thinks this is pretty close to the limits of what a city can do. As I said, it'll probably be the most comprehensive such rules in the entire state. And but there's some wiggle room, and so this is intended to be, it was sort of a draft to get this out there and begin the public discussion on where to go with all this. So there is some wiggle room, but it's not a whole lot, but there is some.
So Tom, according to the chart on C3 Highway Commercial, you've proposed that the emergency shelter, overnight shelter, and the soup kitchen would be listed as permitted under C3 Highway Commercial. Am I reading that correctly?
That's what it says.
But then over in the explanation of section 42-192.1, uses permitted, none of those are listed.
That's because our zoning code is written very confusingly. And the C3 district also allows for uses that are allowed that are conditional or permitted uses in the C2 district. And you'll also see on the chart that emergency shelter, overnight shelter, and soup kitchen are either conditional or permitted uses in the C2. So the first line in the C3 district is all uses allowed in the C2 district. So it didn't need to state all the uses again. It becomes confusing, but that's how it's written.
So those are listed in the C2 in section 42-189.1 as permitted uses or conditional uses, correct?
Yes, or permitted or conditional.
Because I see the conditional uses of the soup kitchen and the overnight shelter,
Let me-
and then emergency services, is that under permitted? I'm not seeing that, but anyway, just wondering.
I believe so the emergency one is first allowed in the C1. So the C2 also says the same thing. It allows for everything that's allowed in the C1 and these things. And then the C3 says everything that's allowed in the C2 and these things. So it kind of carries forward. So you notice the C1 district has got emergency shelter listed as a permitted use. Yes, as a permitted use. And then that kind of carries forward into the C2 and then C3.
But
And
we
Center
don't have
City.
C1 section in here simply because that's the only one that's listed as permitted in C1, the emergency shelter.
Gosh.
Is that correct?
No, I don't. I don't see the C1 in here. Okay, and that needs to be fixed. If the desire is to allow it as a permitted use in the C1 district. Maybe.
So Tom, if a overnight shelter, for example, were to apply for a permit to be located, and let's say a C2 general, and that's a cup, that's a conditional use permit. And we as a board decided that we didn't feel that they met the conditional use. And we denied that. Would they be able then to come back and apply under, say, another area, say, let's say C3, and then that would be permitted?
So if what you're asking is could a property be rezoned, then yes, anyone can ask for a rezoning of a property.
Okay.
Tom, is there a lot of, seems as though when we go through different zoning issues, somewhere in the distant past, they created a lot of the old housing units as C3, such as just south of...
There are some apartments that are in the C3 district, yes.
I'm sorry.
There are some apartments that are in the C3
No,
district.
I'm thinking,
or-
well, apartments, okay.
Sure.
But single-family apartments, something like that.
Okay.
South of, or around the Shoe Factory addition, some of that is not R1.
Yeah, a lot of there's some areas near the Shoe Factory addition, like near Schuman Lake and all that, that's zoned R3, multifamily.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for me?
So Tom, if we send this on with our approval, if that would be the case, to the city council, and they would adopt this, You've been asked about the legal ramifications of it as far as it's been through, I'm guessing, our legal counsel with the city. Has it been cross-checked with Missouri statutes to see that it is applicable and will stay in place? Or is it a matter of, because you say it's been somewhat loosely given us some wiggle room, that we're going to be taken to court over it?
You can be taken to court over no matter what you do. And really, we're in a situation where no matter what you do, there's a pretty good chance that the city will be taken to court over where the mission ends up and whatnot. I think it's best to think of it as a gradient. You know, over here you have for sure a court's going to turn it down, and over here you have for sure a court's going to uphold what you've done. Somewhere in between is where we're at. So really, no matter what we do, you aren't going to know for sure what a court's going to say. And as I said, this is more comprehensive than any other regulation in the state, so it's going to be more toward we don't know what a court would do decide. And so the lawyer's advice is the more you go toward that direction, the more trouble we may have. It may win in court if challenged, but just the more toward that direction, the risk goes up. And so the attorneys said that they feel comfortable with what we've got now, and there may be a little bit of wiggle room where they'll still feel comfortable. You may be able to go even further, toward the riskier side and still win, but we may not. We may end up with this and it be challenged, and it still be a problem also. It's possible.
And I understand that you've done research. You're very good with that. In several different areas, out of state, in state, obviously. When you mentioned Springfield, a lot of this coming from the Springfield area. But I'm wondering how much was incorporated from people within our community other than the city council and planning and zoning, ad hoc, and some groups like that. I mean, was there a comprehensive committee set up to bring in these guidelines and regulations?
No. That's part of what these hearings are to do, is to receive input from the public.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Tom. Good job. We'll officially open the public hearing. As you can see from the four previous, but we don't get a lot of participation in public hearings, and I anticipate we might get a little more this time. So we'll revert to the old format where we have someone speaking for the issue, and then we'll allow someone to speak against it, and we'll alternate back and forth. Here again, I'd ask you to, if you're going to address the group, please come forward and speak at the podium so the TV can pick up your comments. Please try to limit your comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Please try not to repeat what's been said before. This is a really sharp group, and I think they'll understand we don't need 8 people saying the same thing. So without further ado, anyone wishing to speak in favor of this, and remember, we're only dealing with an ordinance. We're not dealing whether we have them or not have shelters or different things. We're just working, our responsibility and our mission is just to address the policy as written and give input to the council on what we decide. So anyway, wishing to speak in favor of this, please come forward, state your name and address. Anyone wishing to speak against this policy, please come forward.
Hi, am I in the right place?
Yeah, it's good.
All right.
Thank you.
My name is Leela Wibbenmeyer, and I live in Rolla, Missouri. I'm in the county, but we have businesses in the city. And Tom mentioned something that I think is really important. He said this is not...
Excuse me just a second. Did you give her your physical address,
Oh,
please?
I have to give my physical address?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's 14990 County Road 5190.
I don't know why, but we're required to have it. Thank you.
Okay, so like I was saying, Tom said something really important. This is not just about the emission. It's not. This is about every single business owner in this town, because that is what this ordinance impacts. And it most definitely will impact our business owners. We have business owners in here today who have had impact. He said it wasn't due to an entity. It might not be. And some of the cases it's not. It's due to what that entity brings to town, and they definitely do good. But when we open this up to every single commercial zone in our city, we are opening this up for issues and problems. It's very irresponsible. It's not only irresponsible, but it's also, it was kind of discouraging to listen to the presentation that you guys just had. Not once was it about how it would impact the people in the zones that this proposal would impact. It was about what the entity would bring. I don't know if that's standard practice or not, but it's here's why we need this entity, not how it would actually impact the actual businesses and residents of those areas. It was very one-sided. This whole process has felt one-sided. Just recently, there was a small town downtown business owners where it was discouraged to protest this to the business owners, where we have drawn up a legal petition. It was said that it was not legal when there is a Missouri statute that we can petition and have protest against a certain ordinance. So this whole process has felt very one-sided, because this is not just about the mission. The mission works in tandem with our law enforcement. What are we going to do when we get somebody who is a different entity that does not live in Phelps County, that is not serving Phelps County residents, of which is not specified in this very broad ordinance? I don't know if you can or not. I understand that there's laws. But Ashley, who's the executive director of the mission, shops in Rolla, eats in Rolla. She serves Phelps County. What are we going to do whenever we've opened up every single zone to an emergency shelter, which in this is not defined? What constitutes an emergency? So Janice, to your point, when you asked if we deny conditional use for a soup kitchen or for an overnight shelter, there's not enough definition or parameters around this for them not to come back and say, well, actually, I'm now an emergency shelter and I can go in here by right, because that's not defined. It's not clear. You could literally be an emergency shelter one day and a soup kitchen the next day and an overnight shelter the next day. There is not enough parameters on this. It is extremely broad. I also think that in addition to being overbroad in definition and overreaching in scope, like Mr. Coote said, this is very comprehensive, and it most certainly is, that it's in direct conflict with the entities in the proposed zones, like I just said. We will most definitely harm our businesses. Like I said, we have business owners here today that are worried about this. This is their livelihood. This isn't like anybody protesting the reasons why you're homeless or any of those issues or those topics. But it is protecting your livelihood and your business that you spent decades building in this town and you care a lot about. Something else that I think is really interesting is per capita, we're right on track, 41 homeless. That was reported last year. But I've gotten a lot of different stats of upwards of over 100 people reported by the RPD and also by Ashley, and I don't want to misquote your stats, but they are way over 41. So now we open this up. We have no parameters. Those things go on. I'm going to keep moving. I saw you check your watch. So this is a super important question to me and also the small businesses. How does this fit into the city's comprehensive plan that the city has for development of this town when you open up every single commercial zone to entities that lack definition that will impact our businesses? And I think that if these zoning amendments pass without the treated importance that they are owed, which I really liked your suggestion. We had a town hall on this. We've had a lot of businesses. We probably have over 30 businesses that have sent in the petitions, which we're told are not legal, which we can amend if it's an issue, that are completely opposed to this. This is the heartbeat of our town. We should be listening to them. This isn't just about the mission, like Tom said. This is about our businesses who are impacted. some homeless cause issues or some transient people cause issues, the arson and the property damage, that was kind of like shuffled over in the presentation, which again, I was disappointed by. The arson was $250,000 worth of damages to a business owner that serves our town. The damages are unable to collect rent because the university is no longer renting from a downtown business because of the area, because of the issues that's going on. So I just really want you to really consider how this is not just this isn't, oh, we're doing a good deed, we're making sure that we have all of these boxes checked and we're covering the bases with homeless. We're a very generous community. I know a lot of people who are very generous in this community, but this needs more thought, this needs more definition, and this needs a narrower scope, or this will be detrimental to our town and we won't be able to rein it back. I'm done.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward. Thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ashley Brooks. I live in the city limits of Rolla. Thank you. Okay, hi. My name is Ashley Brooks. I serve as the Executive Director of the Rolla Mission since 2018. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak today, and I'll try to be brief. However, since we are one of the organizations that will be so heavily impacted by this ordinance, it's important for us to highlight the negative impact this would have on our community if it's passed how it's currently written. The proposed ordinance will only increase the number of people who are homeless and the duration that they are homeless, and it will also tie the hands of any organization that would want to help. Is downtown the most ideal place for a shelter? No, absolutely not. That's what we've said all along, and the reason why we've tried to work with the city to move twice. Both times we were met with no cooperation from the city on how to find a clear and workable path to make those moves happen. We are hopeful that if done right and backed by researched methods that help reduce homelessness, this ordinance will help us find a place to move that works for the people we serve and the community as a whole. I have a copy of the proposed changes we would like to make to the zone or to the ordinance, and I'll highlight a few of the key ones. So I'll begin with the definitions. I agree. It seems like it's desired for emergency shelters to be the pop-up shelters that come after a natural disaster or fire emergency, and overnight shelters to be for people that need a stay of longer than a couple of days following an emergency. The language here states that emergency shelters are of a limited duration, but the overnight shelter definition has the duration limit placed on it, and emergency shelter does not. Furthermore, there are no conditions of use for an emergency shelter. Ideally, we would like to put both overnight shelter and emergency shelter into one category and have the definition match HUD's definition of an emergency shelter. This definition is one used by the government and people working in the field. According to HUD, an emergency shelter means any facility in which the primary purpose is to provide a temporary shelter for the homeless in general or for specific populations of the homeless, and which does not require occupants to sign leases or occupancy agreements. Secondly, we'd like to propose eliminating the 180-day time frame and replacing it with the text that no individual or family shall reside in an emergency shelter for more than 30 consecutive days without entering into case management to obtain housing. I'm not a zoning expert, but that's the best I could come up with. But I'll go with what I'm meaning by that. Policies like that limit the 30 days perpetuate chronic homelessness, which they have a lot of in Springfield. And in many cases, the elderly and disabled are disproportionately affected by these policies because Social Security can take up to 2 years to process. In the meantime, no agencies will take them without income, even if they have Medicaid. Until recently, we had a young woman who was developmentally disabled in our shelter for 7 months, while the SB 40 Board, Health and Senior Services, Compass, and a few other agencies worked to get her to a group home. If this ordinance were to pass, she would have been put out onto the street with a mindset of a 7 to 8 year old for reasons that were out of her control. She's far from the only one that is vulnerable that has stayed in our shelter for months on end because the systems that are supposed to protect them have failed. So far, Rolla has managed to have a much higher success of housing rates, 55%, compared to other cities, 19%, like Springfield's, because we do not have policies like this. However, the nature of this policy is understandable. We don't want anyone to just choose to live in a shelter. Yet the answer isn't to limit the maximum number of days, but instead to create policies that keep people moving towards housing and to get housing as quickly as possible. Next, in Section 5 of the Overnight Shelter Uses section, it states that unless specifically permitted as a family of use shelter, also of which there are no guidelines, overnight shelters must be located a minimum of 500 feet from any school, playground, or daycare. Layered with the other proposed zoning restrictions, that makes it nearly impossible to find a place for a shelter to go. If all of the proposed security measures are followed, it's reasonable to take this out in order to allow a shelter an accessible place to go, which would be more in line with the wording for overnight shelter uses that says such facilities should generally be located such that clients will have access to jobs, counseling, and other resources for assistance. Next, in the soup kitchen section and overnight shelter uses, vague language regarding who will be given access to monitor and enforce operations to adhere to these city guidelines is given. In the overnight shelter section, it just says city representative, which could mean a member of city council or any other city employee could come in to provoke this provision. Also, in the soup kitchen section, it states the development services director or designee must be allowed access to monitor operations and is given authority to terminate the conditional use permit. I could have missed it, but I looked at the city website this morning and I couldn't even find anyone with the title of Development Services Director, much less who they would designate such tasks to. Lastly, in the overnight uses description, it states that individuals served may include those who have substance or alcohol use disorders, are in active use of illegal substances, have mental health conditions, or may have been previously incarcerated. There are many incredible organizations in town that serve this population exclusively, and others that serve a much higher percentage of this population than shelters do. A few examples are Southeast Missouri Behavioral Health, Four Rivers Health Center, Phelps Health, Compass Health, and none of them have this language in their zoning codes. To prevent including discriminatory and stigmatizing language about people who are unhoused, we would like to see this language removed. Going forward, we are asking to more intentionally be a part of developing this ordinance. We would like this to truly be Rolla's mission and end the polarization of the Rolla mission against the city. We want to work together and create an ordinance that increases clarity, compassion, and cooperation. Thank you for your time, and if anybody would like to reach out to me after the meeting, please feel free to do so.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak, please come forward. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is H.E. Jansen. I live in the county just outside of Rolla.
It'll be on the public record, but it doesn't matter. Get published, so thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I went to school for community and regional planning. My family's from the area. I moved in last July. I volunteered at the mission for 7 or 8 months. I worked there for a very short period of time, about 6 weeks. I had a large amount of concerns and critiques about the way the organization was run, but that's not actually why I want to speak. I want to speak more about the foundation and the philosophy of planning as you're going into this. So I think 1919 was Euclid versus Ohio. That was the inception of planning in the United States. And since then, there have been a large number of planning cases that have resulted often in private individuals having a lot of their liberties infringed upon by our ability to plan within cities. And so this is a very powerful tool that we have, and it's something that we need to use responsibly, and it's something that you might make something right now thinking about the Rolla mission and what Rolla mission is doing 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. But we passed something 100 years ago that is defining everything that we do within our cities. So now within our cities, we all have a standard of what a home looks like. You know, most cities don't allow a home under 400 square feet. They have these minimum lot sizes. This is great for single-family homes, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with single-family homes, but a lot of times our legal decisions are very short-sighted. So when considering this, consider that we live in the United States. This is a country of freedom. This is a country of freedom for your organization, for your business, and ask the question of, you know, what is our responsibility? Or is there a problem with homelessness in Rolla? Yes. Well, Miss Leela, is that your name?
Yeah.
Okay, so Leela talked about the problems that she's had with the location of the mission in relation to her business. But as you regulate the other places that the mission is able to move, you're locking the mission into the position that it's going to be, because you're not going to be able to get the mission out of that position. So if you say the mission can only be in 5% of Rolla, the mission's going to stay exactly where it's at, and these problems that it's having in the city center are just going to be perpetuated, and you're going to see these for years to come. And homelessness isn't going away. Look at the economy. Like, look at the way that things are going. Look at the homelessness. I don't know. I grew up in Rolla. There were not really homeless people in Rolla 20 years ago, and 41 is outlandish. When over the winter, we frequently had nights where there were 55 or 60 people staying in the mission, and these are our sheltered homeless people. Take a look around, take a drive around, take a look at the band patrons list that the mission would be happy to share with you. There are easily 80, 100, 120 people that would be categorized as homeless in Rolla, and that number is only going to go up. And if you over-regulate where the mission can go, you're going to say, we want the mission offering these services to 80, 100, 120, maybe 150 people 5 or 10 years from now in the city center. You're saying that's where we want them forever. The more you regulate, the mission wants to move out of the city center. The mission doesn't want to be there. The mission understands that there are conflicts with the businesses there. And so there is a certain amount of freedom that needs to be allowed. And I think that on down the road, if you over-regulate the mission, you're really going to have some serious regrets there. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward.
You all don't know me, and I'm kind of an interloper because I live in Crawford County, God forbid, 219 Beamer Lane, Cuba, Missouri, between Cuba city limits and Fanning. And I do have ties to Rolla in several respects. I also have to plead guilty to being an attorney, and I work a lot with the prosecutor's office and people in that office who work with the city of Rolla. I'm a member of Christ Episcopal Church, where my wife Shelley is the deacon, and I do volunteer for the mission. I'm starting to work with them. Now, I leapfrogged. I got to introduce myself. I'm Stephen Levy, 219 Beamer Lane, Cuba, Missouri.
No, I got that. Can you
Yeah.
speak a little closer to the podium? I don't think they can hear you in the back.
And I'm not speaking for the mission. We have Ashley. I will offer some legal analysis, not as an advocate, but as I listen to the debate, I really do think you have to be better informed. And I don't mean that in any patronizing way, but you're playing with fire here. Let me give you an example of what I've read here. Legislation like this is based on findings legislative findings. And everything can unravel to the extent that those findings are not well thought or incomplete. Now, for example, the concern, again, this was alluded to in 42-224 about the impacts of overnight shelter, saying serve individuals who have substance or alcohol use disorders, et cetera, et cetera. Well, so do boarding houses, so do motels, lodging of any kind. They're allowed in C1. And I hate to speculate on the sorts of people who come into some of the head shops, and there is one not far from here, marijuana dispensaries. There are a lot of areas and facilities that are permitted and unregulated, relatively speaking, that have a similar footprint. I read this, and forgive my language, it's kind of the leper colony approach. We just don't want it, not in my backyard. That's the kind of philosophy that I see here. In law school, we used to be tested on issue spotting. You know, take a fact pattern, what are the legal issues, pro or con? This is fertile ground for issue spotting. A log of each person must be kept and must be submitted on request or upon request. Well, there's something called the Fourth Amendment here. You're being required to submit personal information to a police agency on request without a warrant. Now, people can go to, you know, we were worried about challenges. Somebody could have a field day with that. Same about alcohol. Obviously, illegal drug use is not desired, but my experience with a shelter, just with the mission rather, indicates that they are not, there's zero tolerance for that. But this legislation presupposes that they're going to be lax, and that's not necessarily fair. Again, also access to monitor the operations. Is that going to be spot checks, random checks? Are they going to come in at all hours? Are they going to be scheduled or not? Annual inspection fee. I've done a lot of work on things of that nature. Some courts hold that they aren't in violation of the Hancock Amendment, and you probably know what that is. Some cases hold that it's a fee for service, and so it's okay. But you're opening yourself up to that kind of issue. Soup kitchen, outdoor areas. Well, why can't people eat outdoors on a closed patio? Shouldn't this be a primary responsibility of the health department? I don't see anything in here about that. So I guess what I'm trying to suggest is just my own cursory reading. I think there needs to be zoning, there needs to be regulation, but on cursory reading, this is kind of a can of worms. And I think everybody who's spoken so far has implored you to give more thought to what's going on here. This is the most comprehensive ordinance of its kind in the state. I'm not sure that Rolla wants to be the pioneer. Certainly, you know, Cuba or any of the areas around here should be that innovative to the extent that it can backfire. I believe in order. I believe in law and order. I'm not going to, I think I've just hinted my political affiliation, but I think this needs to be orderly. And I think that there are some philosophical underpinnings. I mean, there are veterans. We talk about may serve individuals who have substance or alcohol use. Well, they may serve veterans. They may serve battered people. Besides, you know, the women's shelter. You know, they may serve a lot of good people, and they probably do. And one final point is, if you don't actively cultivate this type of facility, you're going to end up with vagrants. And let me tell you something about vagrancy. There are constitutional limitations on what you can do with vagrants. That's why you have every park in San Francisco flooded with vagrants. It's a public place. You can't kick people out of public place. Or if you do, I'll tell you what's going to be the overnight shelter, Phelps County Jail. And when it's filled up, it'll be Crawford. And I don't think you want to invite that. That's a problem. So here I am, a non-resident, but with some ties, spouting off. But I think care should be the watchword. And I believe it needs a little bit more study, and maybe somebody asked some kind of study commission about it, and maybe some state support and state agency insight into what might be better. Okay, well, sorry. I hope I didn't exceed my welcome here, but
No.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Anyone else wishing to speak to this, please come forward. We know who you are, Am. You have to state your name record.
I'm Ann Murphy, and I live at 1801 Independence. Thank you. The patrons of the mission, and these are people that have been scrutinized and have been put in the process of service provision. They require the ability to traverse the city to get to the Division of Family Services, to get to a job. They need sidewalks to walk on so they can get there safely and not be hit on the outer road coming in from the highway. The purpose of what I was looking at primarily was the general retail district, is that it's to provide community-wide personal and business services. Okay, and that these commercial use permit in this district, they're usually required to conduct business and indoor activities. Okay, a conditional use permit, a store, factory of whatever sort. So the activities of the shelter, wherever it would be, should personally be inside, unless they have a barricade, a protective, outdoor area that they relax in. Community-wide accessibility dictates that the district locate along an interstate or along an intersection of two arterial roads that will provide that accessibility. And that's under Division 9 of our general retail. So I didn't have my hearing aids in, so I didn't hear everything about, but I really think that we need to, work in this realm. We can't deny a homeless shelter in Rolla. You can't forbid the activity from occurring in a city, and we are a hub city. We're not a little town, but we do have services, and people have been attracted to those for whatever reason. And many other people who don't get services from the mission have been attracted to this area. That's not the mission's issue. The mission has a pretty tight lid on the people that they serve. We may end up feeding additional people from time to time, but as far as patrons that stay overnight, they are patrons that have been, vetted, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Here again, Dale, we know who you are. We need to name and address for the record.
I'm sorry?
Name and address for the record. Thank you. I know who you are, and I think most everybody else does.
Dale Wines, box 977. Missouri.
I'll research why we need that. I don't really know.
Yeah, Dale Wines here in Rolla, own rental property. Have a few concerns, obviously. As far as the mission getting a zoning for them, I'm personally opposed to CC, C1, C2, C3. I realize that we cannot deny them a place to go, but there's other places that they could go. My concern is if we don't stipulate very specifically, where can they go then? And can they go next to a business? I mentioned to someone in the city that they perhaps even could go out towards Academy Sport, right next someplace. Comment was made, well, the ground's too expensive. That's beside the point. Somebody could buy it. Okay. As far as the homelessness goes, I've been here since '70, and until recently, we had very few homeless people. I've made a comment, and so far nobody has denied it. If it weren't for the mission, these people from outside area, from wherever they're coming from, would not be here. I don't mind helping people, obviously, but how many people are we going to allow to come in from other areas? Let me suggest this to you, and I would recommend this to you, that rather than trying to figure out where the mission can go and what is best for the mission, how about considering first and foremost what's best for the businesses in Rolla, downtown Rolla, and other places, what's best for the landlords who have property, who pay taxes, who do all these things. So rather than catering to them, let's cater to the businesses and make sure, from what I can gather, it's possible you can have 2 or 3 or 4 different homeless shelters. I'm not sure about that. But I would certainly strongly recommend that it not be in CC, C1, C2, C3. And there's other places that it can be done. It may be limited. It may be narrowing where they can go. But to me, priority is Rolla. We in the past have always taken care of our own. My question is, how many from outside people can we take care of? Can we take care of 300, 400, 500? I don't know. But I think we have to be careful because whatever ordinance is passed is going to be here forever. So make sure, if at all possible, I realize you're just a recommending board, but we need to make sure that the zone that is passed is something that's going to benefit Rolla in the future. There will not always be those who are strong proponents of the Rolla mission type thing. Time has a way of going on. But what's best for Rolla, not only for the near future, but for the next 15, 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak, please come forward.
Sanchez, 15020 County Road 8450. 150. County Road 8450, Rolla. Hello, my name is Mary Sue Sanchez. I've been a resident of Rolla for a long time in Fort Phelps County. I had an incident happen to me yesterday. My husband and I came into town to do some shopping. We proceeded to go to this store. I looked for a grocery cart, didn't see any. A lady checking out, she had one. Another lady had one. And I thought, which I needed one and everything. And this lady said, checking out, and she said, well, you can take this one after I get my groceries to the car. So I help her take her groceries to the car and get her cart, go back in, do my shopping. And I asked the cashier, I said, where's all the shopping carts. Oh, they're still in them. I thought, wow. So we left there, went to Price Chopper. They have lunch. A couple of homeless people were sitting outside eating. Then we went inside and had our lunch, come back out, looked over. They left all their trash there. I thought, this is saying a lot for Rolla. And then I have the privilege of going to through the 2 turnabouts on Kings Highway to go to my residence. And went through the first turnabout, looked over in the wooded area. Oh, there's 2 tents. And then you look on the ground, bunch of trash. And I thought, well, we getting visitors into Rolla, that's the first thing they're going to see. Well, thank goodness the tree limbs came out with the leaves on it, so I don't see the trash anymore. But, you know, this is what's going to happen to Rolla from now on. So I thought I'd just bring that to your attention.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matt Farrar. I live at 1502 Forum Drive.
Thank you.
I want to reiterate what everybody else has said in opposition to this. If I could, I'd like to show you a video of my doorbell from about a month and a half ago.
Well, it's possible. Go ahead.
This is one of the homeless people at my front door, and I'll try to show you again. Those I'm not showing right now, but that's him trying my front door. This is after he looked through my garage door, peeking in there, scoping it out. And in this video, he looks around, and then he tries my door. And my doorbell says one of two things. Either you have visitors, somebody's pushed the doorbell, or there's a person. In this case, it says there's a person. He didn't push my doorbell. He's already seen my truck, he's seen all my tools, he's seen all my projects I have in my garage. I think it's very reasonable to assume somebody lives here. This is not an abandoned house that I can break into and sleep for the night or do whatever I please in. So I've had personal experience with the mission professionally in a former job. I've now had personal experience as a property owner and a taxpayer in the city. I am all for the businesses and their rights, but I think we also need to think about the residences that live in this city that pay taxes and go to those businesses. And from what I've heard tonight, this ordinance's consideration is not well written, is not well researched, and I think it should be denied tonight and reevaluated, because I do not think it's written well. As the attorney mentioned, I think it sounds like it will open up a can of worms, possibly illegally, for the city. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, gentlemen and Miss Martin. My name is Felicia Richards. I am a resident of the city, and I also have many years working with individuals that this document does kind of encompass, and so I come with that background, and I also do serve on the mission board, just to give you that clarity. And so what I want to talk to you about is just a few clarifying things. I've heard some things, and so I've got some data here that I just kind of want to bring to your attention, because when you write this ordinance, you're impacting a lot of individuals, and when you write Pacific language, you're impacting individuals. So I just want to share a couple of things. Mr. Dale asked about kind of the trend of homelessness, and I know as an entity that works in a lot of different funding opportunities and grants, data is only as good as it's inputted, so I understand that. But we do show that the point-in-time count system that you guys also, or I think Mr. Tom showed here tonight, that 41 individuals were counted as homelessness in 2021. In 2013, that same system counted individuals and found 44. The mission was established in 2014. So the same number of individuals that were counted prior to the mission is the same number that is today. Now, I think we all can agree that that might not be an accurate count, but when we're talking numbers in a system, that is the same way we count individuals each year. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention, there's a lot of talk about where do individuals come, that the mission brings these individuals. We have a regional hospital, we have a mental health facility, we have a substance use disorder facility, all located in this town. All those entities can take individuals who then choose to be AMA. Those entities do not have to ensure those individuals have somewhere to go, but who then steps up? At that point, then, the mission steps up to help those individuals. So, yes, I recognize that there are resources that do drop individuals. I worked at a situation where law enforcement said, I will take that individual to the Phelps County line and drop them there. Yes, that does happen every day in our community, but we shouldn't point the fingers at the mission, because there's lots of different entities that individuals come to seek services in our community that can then leave. The other thing that I want to talk about is there was a lot of discussion about Springfield and kind of using that as our guide point. So in March of this year, Springfield completed a community needs assessment that was conducted by the Connecting Grounds entity. And in their report, they found that Springfield's average time frame for a person to be on the street is 42 months. The average wait time for a family of small children to get into housing is to 3 to 5 years. We see that. Go out and talk to individuals that work with the HUD housing and the organizations that work with those entities. What Ms. Ashley said about 7 months for a woman to get housing is not just one out of a few. It is many individuals. And with your language in here of 180 days of housing, when even in Springfield, it's 3 to 5 years for a family. So you could potentially, the mission takes in families, you could potentially be putting a family on the street before they can seek housing because of, like Ashley said, no control of their own. The other thing that I'd like to highlight is that entities or the individuals that we discuss in this document do seek all those services. Those entities are located near one of the biggest parks in Rolla, located near one of the largest churches that's also a daycare. London, one of those is next right down on Kings Highway, right next to multiple businesses. And all 3 of those are actually located next to lots of housing. And there's no issue with those businesses, but there's an issue with a homeless shelter. And so I'd ask you just to take all these into consideration, that your language, specific language within this, is very impactful to, yes, the businesses of this community, but also the every livelihood of every resident in this community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call. Hearing none, I'll officially close the public hearing. Thank you for your input and your information. Any questions or comments? Did we lose Tom?
He's back.
Yeah, do you have any questions for me? As you go forward, you do have some alternatives. Once again, you can find that the text amendment is needed and recommend the City Council, recommend approval of the City Council as it's presented, or with some modifications that you come up with. We can find it's not appropriate, and so recommend that they take no action on this, or if you need more time, table it to the next meeting. So any questions for me?
Tom, how do we phrase, or how do we go about recommending that the ordinance needs more work, frankly, would be the only way I know how to put it, is that it needs more work. To me, there's a lot of open areas and a lot of vagaries, and I think it needs to be, I don't know if it's, if you had a committee, I think Janice mentioned where there's city people involved, who all was involved. It seems to me that it needs more work.
Well, the intent is it probably does need more work. It's sort of, I wouldn't say first draft, but the intent is to, after taking in public input, to make changes and go from there. So I think would rather than just saying needs more work, I think we'd want some more specific suggestions on what types of things need more work, or especially the zoning districts. I think that's one of the most contentious things is what zoning districts would you like to see things allowed in or not allowed in. Some of the wordsmithing on definitions and whatnot, that we can figure that out as we go along, but I think the really important parts are what districts we want to see it in, and so those requirements of the particular uses, the overnight shelters and the soup kitchens, are those what we want to see, getting those ironed out, I think, are the most important things at this time.
Tommy, with what you just said, I have real concerns about adding some of these things to our ordinance in the city. I'm just concerned that, like some people say, we have to have something in the city. That's their opinion. I don't have that opinion, but that's okay. But 2 winters before the mission came to town were severe winters, bad winters. And I went to the police, I went to the Ministerial Alliance. I asked, where do we need help to take care of these people? And both entities, both years, said there's no issue. We're taking care of whatever the issues are. Somebody said there was 40-some homeless people before the mission came. I didn't see them. The police didn't see them. So if they were, and I'm not saying they weren't there, I'm just saying nobody saw them, and there was not a problem. The city took care of those people. As soon as the mission came, all of a sudden, people flocked to Rolla, came to Rolla. People I'd never seen before. And it's still happening to this day. If you go out right now, the street south of the mission, there's a car parked there. 2 people are living in that car. We came by as we came to this meeting, and there was a lady bringing food out to that person, those 2 people. I don't know why they're there. The car's been there for a week. I don't know why. 3 weeks?
Yes, sir.
3 weeks. I'm not sure where in this ordinance you take care of that kind of situation. Tents are not allowed in the city. They're everywhere. How do you enforce this ordinance that we're wanting to do when we're not enforcing the laws we have on the books right now? I guess I'm wandering around. But I look at certain things like different types of youth housing for inner city people. We've seen where that's been brought to Rolla. Why, I don't know why they don't put it where it's needed. Why they brought it here, I don't know. So my concern is that if we build some of these things, the soup kitchen, and we open up certain other areas to overnight shelters, other things, it's one of those deals where you bring it, you build it, they come. And that's my concern. I don't know what to do about it, but I'm just expressing my opinion. I have 2 emails from people that I thought I'd read, but maybe I won't do that. So I have real concerns that this doesn't address some of my concerns. I could, I'm not a lawyer, but I could blow holes through a lot of this thing. So, anyway.
Any other comments or questions? We have a challenge, I'm not sure we have a real good solution.
Well, really, this should have been hashed out in a committee before we even got it.
Yeah, that's true.
And can we recommend that to go to the council and form a committee and hash this out and bring it back to us? Is that something we can do as a recommendation?
What I would suggest is making a motion. I would like to make a motion. We send this back to the city council with our disapproval and allow them, at that point, it's their issue to reinvest in it, I think. So I would like to make that motion.
Well, that's a good motion, but my concern is if we do that, the council goes, we're done with it, and do nothing.
That's their prerogative.
Well, we need something. So maybe it's up to all you people to hold the council's feet to the fire and say, get the committee and get it done. And we want to be part of it.
Well, we have basically three solutions. We can pass the ordinance as is, we can modify it and then take all night. We can, just a second, Lou. We can deny it and state our reasons, or we can table it for a month, and so we're pretty limited in what we can do. So.
You've got three options here.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Magnus. You're an ex-official member, I have to recognize you. You're non-voting, by the way, if you're ex-official.
Non-voting.
I will remind you that.
I can't break ties either, in case you didn't hear that story.
I can't either. I've been here 10 years. They haven't split in the 10 years I've been chairman, so.
I've been a mayor for 8 years, and I will tell you the #1 issue has not been decriminalizing marijuana, hasn't been the mask ordinance, it has been the homeless issue. And most of that input came to me when I'm at Walmart or via an email or something like that. So about a year ago, I said, I think it's time for the community to have a discussion out in the open. This is an extremely complex issue, most of which we can't solve. Let's not kid anybody. The citizens, everything I heard tonight, for and against and in between, had a lot of merit. It really did. But I don't know that this community has discussed it long enough and hard enough to really take it to a conclusion. Monty, I think conventionally a subcommittee is a good idea. But I think for a subcommittee to be effective, you have to have some sense of, I don't want to say compromise because that can be overused, but some inherent interest to find a solution. And I don't know that the community has that just yet. I wouldn't have the foggiest idea who to ask to be on a committee, to be honest with you. So I think Russ's point has some value, and that is to send it back to council. I'm not so sure council's in a place to make a decision either. There's a sense of urgency by the city council because the council persons, and we hear it. By George, you got to do something. By George, you got to do something. But at the end of the day, what can we really do? I mean, the city's in a position to deal with enforcement, okay? When a law is broken, of which homelessness is not a criminal activity, but the city has the tools and the wherewithal to deal with enforcement. There's another group of people that deal with enforcement. But when you talk about what else we can do, we are extremely limited. You know, Dale Wanzast made a very good point. What are you going to do for the businesses? Think about us businesses. That's great, Dale, but you know what? You gotta offer some solutions. Because on one hand, you expect the city to do something. Don't put these things next to residences, don't put these things here, don't put these things there. But in the same breath or the same sentence, you say, don't give us anything. So I'm not saying any of that to be critical to anyone. I'm just saying I don't know as a community if we're actually ready to make a decision. I do not speak for the city council. The city council has not really discussed this in any great length. They have not made a decision. So my comments right now are as a mayor, and I'm not the official position of the city. Any questions, comments, or criticism to that? Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. We keep being told this needs to be a community conversation, and there are some, I mean, I feel like we're trying. Like Ashley and I and Dale hosted a town hall. At what point is it the city's administrative responsibility to lead that discussion to where we can make a difference? We have talked, we are getting on the same page, but this is not, we're not included. I mean, I live in the county, I couldn't be included, that's fine, but we need leadership here. You leave it to the community to do this, you're gonna always have division. We need leadership, and we're looking to our city administration, and I don't know how all the ins and outs of that work, but that's what we need, or we will never come to a conclusion. Community conversation. We hosted a town hall with over 200 people and it was televised. Okay, now what? We did that. The consensus was divided. We need leadership, and that's just how I feel about it.
Well, I think there also needs to be an acknowledgement that there's change happening as this discussion is happening.
Yeah.
You know, I'm no longer involved with the mission, but while I was there, I watched a lot of rules change, and it was rules. So the thing is like every criticism about the mission has been absolutely on point. You know, there are huge problems that come about from homelessness, and every city in the United States is facing them. And I've been to a lot of cities in other countries, and they're facing them too. Homelessness is a problem. There's a shortage of housing. There's a crisis of mental illness. There is an environmental and economic crisis that is exploding across the entire nation. And like this, like, I don't know, I don't really want the government to run my entire life. And I think most of it's funny that we've got all the business owners in here that are wanting the city to take the control of this, like control. Well, like we live in the United States, like this is a free country. Like if you want the government to control you, like go look at China. China doesn't have a homeless problem. China has complete control from the government. And like that's not where we live. Like we live in a place where we have community input, where we have expectations that the organization comes to the problems that the community has and listens to those. And I think that that's what's happening. And I think that the conversation needs to continue. But I agree with the mayor. I just don't think that we're at a place where this is going to conclude. And I don't think this is ever going to conclude. This is just a conversation that's going to happen for decades.
Getting back to point, I would entertain a motion.
What was your motion, Russ?
That we send it to the city council with our disapproval because, as everybody on both sides have stated, this is not a good ordinance. This is incomplete. There's too many loopholes. I can sit here and read through this thing and I can figure ways to get around it. And I'm not sharp. Watch it.
Was that a motion?
Watch it.
I didn't think I'd ever hear that.
Yeah, but to the last gentleman's comments, I did have an email from an individual that basically restates what you stated. If we put these ordinances down and as a government body, we say you have to do this, and this, we're not putting that on the mission. We're putting that on, saltwater, hoppers, anybody else. We can tell them they have to have logs, they have to require cameras, we could do that to anybody. And so we have to be careful with what we put out here, and that's why I felt that this thing, we need to send it back with our disapproval and let them take it and do something better. That's my thoughts. Anyway.
We have a motion, do we have a
Second.
second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? The motion is to send it to the city council with our disapproval. Now we have to state the reasons.
Basically that it is inadequate. I think it's an overreach of power. Anything else? Anybody?
We need a consensus. Anybody disagree with any of that?
At times too vague and at times too strict.
Okay,
Okay, however you want to do it.
that's enough?
It has some inconsistencies, and that was what I was trying to get at the beginning, is we need to take a step back. Now, the public has done an excellent job this evening of bringing out those inconsistencies, bringing them to our attention. So I think as a group, we need to send it to the city council saying, until these inconsistencies in the way this is written and the way it's been presented to us are addressed, we are not in favor of this.
Any other discussion?
I got something to say.
Say or not.
We're in the middle of a meeting. We have a motion and a second. I'm sorry. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Kreider,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Shields.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. I'd like to thank the audience for let's see what's on the agenda. Next item is other business reports from the chairperson. We have a committee that has met for 2 hours for 8 weeks. That's rewriting Chapter 42. Anybody on the commission is welcome to sit in. There's 2 of us on the commission that's been participating. It's also the Board of Adjustment, City Council, city staff. Really hard-working group and getting a lot done. We'll see it later. Like I said, I'd like to thank the audience for their demeanor and their good behavior. Never know with the public hearing what you're going to get, but I appreciate everybody's cooperation. And the only other thing I have is we're still lacking a member. Encourage the city council to find one. They recently voted down one of the mayors. Both us and the Board of Adjustment are short people. We cannot operate without talented and competent people. I would encourage them to get training and figure out what they're supposed to do so that we can get a full board and be operational. Anything else from the commissioners?
Chairperson, we have to have citizen comments.
Okay, any other citizens' comments? Now's the time you can speak if you haven't already. Yeah, now you can come forward, sir. Please come to the podium so the TV can hear you.
Hello, my name is Nino Esparza, and I'm a resident of Rolla.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have heard of the Bill 1938. It's the homeless Bill of Rights. The stuff you presented clearly violates those for sure, and you're almost trying to reinvent the wheel. It's already been discussed as far as in the leadership. I think they went above and beyond what you guys could be expected of. And as far as, like, say, the price value, and Mr. Wands personally has probably done more to bring down the price values in this town than about anybody I know. So we do need to have real discussions about what's going on, but, you know, truthful discussions that I believe that, I mean, we can go on and on, but I don't want to. Anyway, look into that bill, and we need to have real discussions about real solutions, and not all the anger and, you know, that's all.
Thank you. I'll research it. Any other citizen comments? Again, thank you for cooperation. We're adjourned.